Hello and welcome to another modelling video. This is Alan from the Man YouTube with another hobby related video. Something a bit different. We'll be attempting a BJD or ball jointed doll utilising scale model methods. I was given a choice of a few bodies. I don't know where they come from or what they are exactly, but with measurement and a few eBay searches I found this piece, which I like quite a bit, to be 1/4 in scale and is strung up with an elastic connecting all the different joints together. It is cast in resin. This video is experimental in nature using scale model techniques, which is not that uncommon for the Japanese community of doll makers. I'm a big fan of the Volks and Dollfie lines, which is done in the more anime style than doll style, which I'm not a big fan of. Ultra realistic or well sculpted ones from China depicting celebrities, movie stars and military scenes is also popular and could be explored in the future. In this piece I'm using a range of automotive wet and dry sandpaper dipped in water. It's important to get adhesion for any sort of pigment or weathering or painting, so I'm roughing up the surface from 220 grit to 1000 grit. It is very tedious to go around all the ball joints, and being resin cast I also should have cleaned in soapy detergent water as I had painting issues later. A selection of the doll, I went for the body and not concerned with the face. You can replace the head, though it wasn't too hard to simplify the features and used putty utilising a Dremel and opening the eyes. Involvement in doll making and collecting can be as simple as commissioning or making up the face, purchasing everything and dressing up, to sculpting, sewing, making your own props and modification, which is more in line to this channel. I wanted to utilise my full abilities and studio and went hard on the 3D printing side of things in making and scaling my props rather than purchasing off AliExpress. Going for Mordred, a character from the Fate series who is very urban, I wanted her sitting on a milk crate rather than a seat or traditional stand. The scaling comes in handy where you know the size, and using scale model calculator I was able to get the dimensions right and have her sitting. I removed all the spurs and melted the plastic with a torch to get a smooth finish with minimal effort. Back to the head, it was a gradual process of marking out the shapes more akin to the reference material, grinding down and then sanding smooth with the gradients of different paper, double checking, remarking and making further adjustments. Where there was deep detail such as the nostrils and around the nose and mouth, this left a bit of a cavity, which was fairly easy enough to fill with dissolved putty and sanded a third time round. As I'm going to be painting up the face, a lot of this will be covered up. The milk crate was an amazing demonstration of raw filament printing, but now we're moving to SAL resin and actually designing a piece instead of downloading off Thingiverse. A Clanet Mordred sword, an image was downloaded as reference off the wiki and line art was produced in Fusion 360. I broke it down into various parts and extruded a thickness for each area and gave it the correct beveling, chamfers and edges. For ease, this was designed at 1:1 scale and scaled down to 1/5. The handle was a tad thick and needed a bit of grinding down, though the detail was of the right proportions to be picked up in paint. I airbrushed it in automotive metallics and touched up everything else by hand. This method was ideal for the scale. The doll community refers this process to makeup or blushing, and normally a pigment is dusted on with a wider series of brushes and their face with finer liners and then sealed. I'm taking the airbrush approach and utilizing my collection of anime and flesh tones to get the right shades. This is all cast in a flesh color already, but kind of looks a bit dead, with 3 tones of a tan, olive, light flesh and then a bit of a blush in some areas, picking up the nipples as well, it popped quite nicely in the same way as I tackle my garage kits. As there is a lot of knuckles and articulated points, it was not very elegant to get many positions to paint it ideal. There was some fish eye and some points where I didn't clean or sand sufficiently. Unlike GK, the soul of a project is in its eyes, and with a hollow head and eye cavities, you're able to buy scaled eyes and plop it in. There was a massive collection of everything from resin to glass, and I found this fairly interesting animated fire eye effect that gave it a combat ready appearance in the right main color scheme. A wig was also purchased. Synthetic fibers and very cheap. It is easier to find it unscaled and not styled yet, as long as the elastic fits around the dome of the head. I got it far too long and had to go at hair cutting and styling it myself, which is an experience I've never performed or done before. I have a family member who is a doll artist and got a few tips. They said getting it in a spiky anime tone is near impossible. To start off with, I cut the bangs and the length to the size that I wanted and wrapped everything up in the ponytail, though it looked very stiff, unnatural and strange, especially when it was jagged. Hitting it up with a very strong lacquer hairspray, which I normally use for my 3D printing, it made it flexible and moldable, where I was able to run my fingers through and clump the hair in a way that depicted the same pattern as the character according to the reference, and gave me a profile and look that I was going for. It's slightly greasy and very messy, though works with the combat nature of the character. I can go for something neater in future. Fun bit was coasting around websites, AliExpress, eBay, and looking for accessories and clothing for the doll. The boots and shoes, which is the most expensive component, worked a treat and looked wonderful. With the clothing, I couldn't get the right colour, so I just bought a white jacket and shorts and purchased dye. With no dye experience, I thought I'd be able to airbrush it rather than soaking the entire garment not to waste the material, and thinning it with equal parts and then further with vinegar. It actually sprays quite easily and well, soaking up the entirety of the garment. You can even go as far as doing lines, fades and effects. It is heat treated, so I've, instead of utilizing boiled water, added it in the craft air fryer and baked it so it wouldn't stain the resin or come off on tissue or paper. This strange experiment came off quite successfully and got the colours that I wanted. A single coat does come up as a bit patchy, but with 2 or 3 layers of dye, you get a fairly convincing colour and intensity. Little touch-ups were added, such as a belt buckle on the shorts, painting of a belt, and a boob tube out of a hair scrunchie tie with the detail hand painted in acrylics. The flexible nature of the clothing, functional zips, functional buckles, props that can be held in the hand, and the ultimate articulation to achieve any pose, wax behind the eyes to move them around to make tracking, and flexible hair. It's the ultimate piece of storytelling and a different art form. I believe I got it pretty close to the reference of the character, and it's instantly recognizable when displayed and put out at the Animanga show display. This was fairly challenging. I made mistakes and errors along the way. There's a few techniques I would rather reach into the doll community than modeling, like using wax in the back of the head instead of sculpting putty. I'd like to try a different technique in styling the wig for a neater look in achieving a different character, and definitely want to play with more outfit clothing, or even have an attempt at sewing and making something from scratch. Had an incredible amount of fun. I know sculpting is popular, but pairing ball jointed doll accessories with mechanical 3D printed components worked an absolute treat. I'd love to get neater at making up the face and being closer to some of the examples I've been seeing out of Japan, or even outright sculpting and creating greater detail on the head. But with this attempt, pretty satisfied. Again, don't take any of this as advice. It's not traditional doll making methods. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, until next time, stay tuned for further content, and we'll catch you guys next time. See you later.